Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into an era that truly laid the groundwork for, well, one of the world's most enduring civilizations, the Shang Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just about, you know, ancient dates and dusty artifacts. It's more of a journey into a period just packed with incredible firsts. It acts as this really crucial, vibrant bridge between Chinese prehistory
Yeah.
and the very dawn of its recorded history.
Right, that transition point is key.
Exactly. So our mission, if you will, for this deep dive is to sort of navigate through a stack of fascinating sources, archaeological reports, historical texts, you name it, and really unearth the most important nuggets about a civilization that basically set the stage for millennia of Chinese culture, governance, and technological innovation. So get ready. You're going to get a really in-depth understanding of a pivotal time that fundamentally shaped the world we know.
Yeah, and what truly stands out about the Shang Dynasty is just its foundational significance. We're exploring a civilization that thrived for a really impressive 550 years.
Wow, 5.5 centuries.
Yeah, roughly from 1600 BC to, say, 1046 BC. And its heartland was strategically positioned in the middle north of China, specifically within that incredibly fertile and vital Yellow River Basin, the Huanghe.
Yellow River, right.
Now, while it's traditionally recognized as the first recorded dynasty in Chinese history, what gives it such powerful, undeniable weight is that its historical reality, its very existence, was unequivocally confirmed by those groundbreaking 20th century archaeological discoveries.
Mostly Anyang, you meant.
Primarily Anyang, yes. And these extensive excavations, they didn't just, check a box saying, yep, they existed. They literally peeled back layers of time, revealing this astonishingly intricate picture of daily life, complex political and social hierarchies, sophisticated religious practices, and just unparalleled artistic achievements that define the Shang.
Absolutely. So, okay, if we really want to understand the Shang, we have to start right at the beginning. Right?
Yeah.
How did this powerful and, as you said, remarkably long-lived dynasty even come to be? It's important to remember, like, the Shang didn't just spring up overnight from nothing. Instead, it emerged directly from this rich tapestry of earlier Chinese Neolithic cultures. It built on centuries of gradual development and innovation.
That context is crucial.
It really is. When we talk about these precursors, we're specifically looking at cultures like Yangshao and Longshan. The Yangshao, active around 5000 to 3000 BC, were known for their, vibrant painted pottery and settled farming villages.
Right, the painted pottery culture.
Exactly. Then came the Longshan culture from roughly 3000 to 2000 BC, and they're distinguished by their highly polished black pottery, the development of early walled settlements, that's important, and increasingly sophisticated farming techniques.
So building complexity over time.
Precisely. These weren't just random groups. They were the essential groundwork, this sort of societal and technological crucible that paved the way for something much grander. These cultures, they pioneered advanced agricultural techniques, which allowed for consistent food surplus, which is critical for everything else.
Absolutely, that surplus changes everything.
It does. They developed a clear understanding of animal husbandry, raising pigs, cattle, horses providing food, labor, and eventually transportation.
Yeah.
And crucially, they moved beyond scattered groups to establish early forms of organized permanent settlements. These innovations created the population density and the surplus resources needed for a more complex, specialized society to take root. And here's where it gets really interesting. That dramatic, pivotal transition from these relatively self-sufficient, sort of localized communities to a truly centralized, powerful authority, culminating in the formidable Shang state. It was like a leap from village to kingdom, wasn't it? Fueled by innovation and organization.
Indeed, that transition is key. In traditional historical sources, they credit a pivotal figure named King Tang with the founding of the Shang dynasty.
King Tang, huh?
His rise wasn't exactly a peaceful handover. It involved a significant assertion of power, of independence. Tang is traditionally depicted as leading the Shang in a decisive overthrow of the preceding Xia dynasty.
The Xia, which is somewhat legendary, but increasingly supported by archaeology.
Exactly. Largely supported now, yes. And then Tang established Shang's undeniable dominance over a multitude of other regional tribes and proto-states in the area. This wasn't just a change in who was in charge. It signaled a profound, widespread increase in Shang's political and military capacity across that whole Yellow River plain.
Right.
It marked a new era where a single, powerful entity began to exert broader, centralized control and influence. And that really laid the foundation for its remarkably long reign. This consolidation of power, often through, strategic alliances, but also definitely military campaigns, was absolutely crucial for everything that defined the Shang dynasty in the centuries that followed.
And location, 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 right? Their geography played this enormous, almost incalculable role in that consolidation and their long-term success. So what was it about the Yellow River Basin that made it so uniquely crucial?
Well, it's fundamental.
Paint us a picture. The Shang heartland, including their later pivotal capital city, Anyang, was strategically nestled right there in the middle and lower sections of the Yellow River. This wasn't just like a convenient spot. It was a geographic gold mine. It provided unparalleled natural advantages.
Like the fertility of the land.
Exactly. You had these incredibly fertile lands, constantly enriched by the river's annual flooding, which deposited that nutrient-rich silt lodoous soil. This sustained highly productive agriculture, primarily millet and wheat, which was the absolute lifeblood of their economy. I mean, think about it. A stable, abundant, predictable food supply is the indispensable foundation for any large-scale civilization to develop complex social structures and specialized labor. You just can't do it without that base.
No, you really can't. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can clearly see how this specific geography provided both inherent protection and also vital pathways for expansion and interaction.
How so?
Well, the natural borders formed by the meandering Yellow River itself, and maybe surrounding somewhat mountainous or hilly terrain, offered a considerable degree of defense. It created a kind of sheltered core for their early development.
Okay, bit of a natural fortress.
In a way, yes. But simultaneously, the river system itself, with all its tributaries, it facilitated crucial commercial and diplomatic relationships. It allowed for easy movement of goods and people. It served as a vital artery for trade with neighboring tribes and even more distant regions. And it was indispensable for, rapid military deployment and just maintaining communication across their expanding territory.
Makes sense.
So it truly was a strategic hub for both defense and outreach. It allowed the Shang to consolidate internal power while also projecting their influence externally. The Yellow River wasn't just where they lived, it was the fundamental enabler of Shang's prosperity. Its economic engine supporting that intensive agriculture, which in turn supported a growing, specialized population, directly fueling all the other monumental developments we're going to talk about.
Right. Okay, so now that we have a clearer picture of where they were and how the Shang dynasty got started, let's dive into how this sophisticated state was actually run. How did it function? The Shang dynasty, from what we understand, was characterized by a highly centralized and rigorously hierarchical state structure.
Very much so.
At the absolute apex of this pyramid was the king. And his role was far more encompassing than just being a political ruler, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He was also the supreme religious leader, the primary intermediary between the human world and the divine, the spirit world.
So political and spiritual authority rolled into one.
Exactly. And this dual role meant his authority was seen as, divinely sanctioned, a direct mandate from the heavens, or from Shangdi, the high god, and that immensely bolstered his power and legitimacy in the eyes of his subjects.
Now, the king didn't govern alone, though, did he?
No, definitely not. He ruled with the essential support of a powerful hereditary aristocracy. These weren't just nobles hanging around, they were the major landowners, commanding vast resources. And critically, they formed the elite warrior class.
The military backbone.
Precisely. Their unwavering loyalty, mostly unwavering, and their formidable military prowess were absolutely essential to maintaining the king's rule, suppressing any internal dissent and expanding the dynasty's influence through conquest. This system allowed for a relatively stable, though probably often contested, distribution of power.
And how did this central authority manage to exert control over such vast territory? There wasn't just one city.
No, it covered a significant area. They did it through a surprisingly sophisticated system of local administrators, often drawn from this very aristocracy, who acted as governors or regional lords, and crucially, efficient tax collectors.
Taxes.
Oh, wait.
Always taxes.
Always taxes. This highlights a complex and, for its time, really well-organized state apparatus. It enabled the Shang to manage resources effectively, mobilize massive amounts of labor for monumental projects, think city walls, palaces, those incredible tombs, and maintain order across its ever-growing realm.
Right.
And this intricate structure, it naturally raises an important question. How did such a rigidly stratified society actually function day to day, with such sharp divisions between classes?
Yeah, how did that work?
Shang society was indeed Meticulously stratified, it operated like a pyramid with distinct, clearly defined classes. At the very pinnacle, as you said, stood the king and the royal family. Their position was seen as absolute, wielding both political and spiritual authority.
Untouchable, almost.
Pretty much. Immediately below them were the aristocratic warriors, along with priests and those highly skilled artisans we'll talk more about. The aristocracy had this deep shared interest with the king, not just in wealth, but often actively participating in political administration, military command, and importantly, critical religious duties.
So the warriors and priests were often from the same elite group.
Often intertwined, yes. The priests, in particular, held a unique and incredibly powerful role. They were the crucial intermediaries between the human and supernatural worlds, primarily through those elaborate divination rituals using oracle bones.
We definitely need to get into oracle bone.
Oh, we will. Their interpretations of divine will profoundly influence state decisions on war, harvests, everything. Then you had the artisans, especially the master bronze casters. They were exceptionally valued for their critical contribution to the dynasty's material culture, producing those incredible bronze artifacts central to ritual and warfare.
So they weren't at the bottom then?
No, not at all. They held a respected position. Then, at the broad base of this social pyramid were the peasants, and, tragically, a significant population of slaves.
Okay, so let's break down those roles a bit more. Peasants and slaves at the bottom.
Yes. The peasants formed the economic backbone of Shang society. They were primarily involved in that extensive agriculture we mentioned, cultivating millet, wheat, often using pretty basic but effective tools like stone hoes, wooden plows.
Hard labor.
Extremely hard labor. Beyond crops, they also engaged in crucial animal husbandry, raising pigs, cattle, horses providing essential protein, hides, labor. They literally produced the overwhelming bulk of society's output, sustaining everyone else up the pyramid.
And the slaves, where do they fit in?
Slavery, regrettably, was a well-established and grim part of the structure. Slaves were typically war captives from those ongoing conflicts with neighboring tribes, or sometimes individuals who fell into insurmountable debt.
So prisoners of war and debtors.
Primarily, they occupied the very bottom rung. They performed the most arduous manual labor in fields, maybe in mines, definitely on large construction projects. And alarmingly, they were also frequently used in human sacrificial rituals.
Human sacrifice.
Yes, unfortunately. To honor ancestors or deities. It's a darker aspect confirmed by archaeology. So this rigid class system, with the aristocracy drawing vast resources from the peasant class, maintained control through military might, religious authority, and strict social codes. It was absolutely fundamental to the Shang's remarkable stability, wealth, and power for over 5 centuries.
It's a stark picture. So what does all of this mean for the daily life and the overall sustenance of the Shang dynasty, especially for the average person, the peasant?
Well, life was likely very tough, dictated by the agricultural cycle.
As you highlighted, agriculture was utterly dominant. The fertile lands of the Yellow River Valley were meticulously cultivated, not just for subsistence, but to generate that significant surplus we talked about.
The surplus was key.
This agricultural prowess was the direct foundation for their economy. It enabled the support of a large, increasingly specialized population that didn't have to work the land. The king, nobles, priests, artisans, soldiers.
Right.
And beyond the intensive crop cultivation, animal husbandry was equally crucial. Pigs, cattle, horses, not just for food, but for sacrifices, labor, and eventually transportation, especially those swift war chariots that became a signature of Shang military power.
The chariots are iconic.
Definitely. And all this agricultural output, the sheer abundance, it fed directly into the state's elaborate economic and social structure. A significant portion of these products, grain, livestock, maybe handcrafted goods. It didn't stay with the peasants who produced them. It went directly to the king and the aristocracy as taxes or tribute.
The tax system reinforcing the hierarchy.
Exactly. It wasn't just about revenue. It was a deliberate, effective mechanism for reinforcing both the centralized economy and the established social hierarchy. It ensured the elite maintained their wealth, status, and control over resources, cementing their position at the top.
And while agriculture was undoubtedly primary, the bedrock of society, providing for pretty much everyone, trade also played a crucial, albeit maybe secondary, role.
Okay, so they weren't totally isolated.
Not at all. The Shang engaged in commerce not just with their immediate neighbors, but also with more distant regions, reaching surprisingly far beyond their immediate sphere of influence.
What were they trading?
Well, this wasn't just about everyday goods. It facilitated the critical exchange of valuable raw materials, especially those essential metals like copper, tin, and lead needed for their advanced bronze work. These weren't always readily available right in the Shang heartland.
Ah, so they needed to import the ingredients for their famous bronze?
Often, yes. They also traded for luxury goods, things like jade, which was highly prized, cowrie shells, which were actually used as a form of currency, and maybe exotic animal products or other rare materials.
So this shows a broader economic network.
Definitely. It indicates that the Shang's economic network extended far beyond just localized subsistence farming. It demonstrates a dynamic, interconnected system where strategic resources and exotic items could be acquired, further enriching the elite, supporting their sophisticated material culture, and fueling those monumental artistic and technological endeavors, like the bronze casting itself.
Right, let's transition to those innovations then. The things that truly define the Shang dynasty and left such an indelible, visible mark. First and foremost, we absolutely have to marvel at the incredible artistry and, frankly, the unparalleled technological prowess of their bronze work.
It's truly astonishing.
This period is widely considered one of the most significant in world history for bronze casting, a genuine golden age for this alloy. The material itself, it's an alloy of copper and tin, sometimes with lead added, carefully proportioned. But what made the Shang unique, what really set them apart, was their absolute mastery of the multi-piece mold technique.
Can you explain that a bit more? How did it work?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Unlike the simpler lost wax method used elsewhere, the Shang method was a real feat of engineering. They would create these intricate ceramic molds in multiple sections, precisely carved and decorated with incredible detail, often on the inside of the mold pieces.
Wow, okay.
These sections would then be meticulously assembled around a central core, leaving a precisely shaped space between the core and the outer mold pieces. That space is where the molten bronze would be poured.
So a very complex assembly.
Incredibly complex. Once the bronze was poured and cooled, the mold would be carefully disassembled, often broken away, to reveal the finished piece. This incredibly advanced, labor-intensive technique allowed for the creation of unbelievably complex, intricate, and geometrically perfect objects. We're talking vessels adorned with three-dimensional elements, layered designs, super precise patterns, things that were simply unparalleled anywhere else at that time. The sheer scale and precision suggest a level of organized labor and technical knowledge that's just staggering for that era.
It really does speak volumes about their societal organization.
Absolutely. And these weren't just pretty objects to look at. While they were breathtakingly beautiful, their primary purpose was often deeply ritualistic and profoundly symbolic. We see these magnificent ritual vessels, iconic types like the ding.
The tripod cauldrons.
Exactly. Those imposing tripod cauldrons used for cooking or holding ceremonial food. And the key, a distinctive round food container, often with handles. And the ju, that elegant three-legged wine cup with a spout, all adorned with incredibly intricate patterns.
What kind of patterns?
We're talking complex geometric designs, highly stylized animal motifs, dragons, birds, cicadas, and even fearsome mythological figures.
Oh.
Most famously, the toddy mask.
Yes, the toddy, that sort of symmetrical monster face.
Exactly. Often interpreted as a protective or maybe awe-inspiring guardian figure. These vessels were far more than just art. They were sacred objects. They were used in elaborate sacrifices to gods and, critically, to ancestors, literally bridging the gap between the living and the spirit world.
Instruments of ritual communication.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They also functioned as powerful, unmistakable symbols of social status and aristocratic authority. The larger, the more ornate, the more numerous the bronze vessels and individual or family-owned, the higher their status and influence within Shan society. It was a visible display of power and connection.
A status symbol, essentially.
A major one.
Yeah.
But bronze wasn't solely for rituals and display. It was also absolutely essential for military applications. The Shang cast formidable war instruments, spearheads, those characteristic dagger axes known as ij.
The ij, right, mounted on poles.
Yeah, very effective. Also short swords and fittings for their war chariots. This superior bronze weaponry gave the Shang army a significant technological and tactical edge over their enemies, whose tools and weapons were likely still made of less durable stone or maybe earlier, softer copper.
Right.
The hardness, the durability, the ability of Shang bronze to hold a sharp edge. It was truly a game changer in warfare, contributing immensely to their military dominance.
And this profound mastery of bronze work, its sheer scale and complexity, it raises an important question, doesn't it? How did this elevate the status of the artisans themselves, the people actually making these things?
That's a great point.
It certainly did elevate them quite dramatically. The highly specialized, technically demanding nature of bronze casting meant that master bronze casters weren't just, laborers banging metal. They were economically vital and socially important figures within Shang society.
Respected specialists.
Highly respected, often organized into specialized workshops, perhaps living in privileged quarters near the palaces or temples. Their expertise was absolutely crucial for producing the ritual vessels that legitimized the king's rule and connected him to the divine, and the advanced weapons that secured the dynasty's power and facilitated its expansion. This indicates a highly sophisticated division of labor where certain craftsmen held positions of considerable influence and prestige. It reflects the immense value placed on their unique talents and the strategic importance of their craft to the entire state.
So it wasn't merely craftsmanship, it was a vital component of the state's power and identity.
Exactly. The sheer resources and manpower required just to fuel this industry. Mining the ores, transporting them, processing them, the casting itself, it speaks volumes about Shang's centralized control and organization.
Okay, beyond the gleaming bronze, arguably the most profound and enduring legacy of the Shang dynasty is, well, the birth of Chinese writing.
Monumental. Absolutely monumental.
This is truly huge, a pivotal development for all of East Asia, really. When we talk about the earliest known written documents from China, we are unequivocally talking about oracle bones.
Jiaguan.
Right. And these weren't just any old bones. They were typically plastrons, flat undersides of turtle shells or scapulae, the shoulder blades of oxen, large, flat surfaces suitable for writing on. These bones were central to those elaborate divination rituals that formed the core of Shang religious and political practice. The process itself is just utterly fascinating. Questions, often concerning future events or matters of state, were meticulously inscribed onto the prepared bone surface.
Carved right into the bone.
Exactly. Then, a hot bronze rod, or maybe a burning piece of wood, a poker, was applied to specific pre-drilled pits or hollows on the back of the bone. This intense heat caused the bone to crack in distinct patterns on the front surface.
Ah, so the cracks were the key.
Precisely. The diviner, often the king himself acting as the chief shaman or a high-ranking priest, would then interpret the patterns of these cracks to determine answers or prognostications from the gods or ancestors. It was a way of seeking guidance.
Direct communication with the supernatural, in their view.
That's how they saw it. And the function of this writing was dual purpose and intrinsically linked. It served both critical religious and political functions. The kings and their highly trained priests would inscribe questions or meticulously record outcomes about matters of immense importance onto these bones.
What sort of things did they ask?
Oh, all sorts. We find inquiries about predictions for war outcomes, military campaigns, expectations for the harvest, the weather, hugely important for an agricultural society, plans for royal hunts, inquiries about illnesses affecting the royal family, the right time for rituals, even things like dream interpretation. Basically anything vital concerning the well-being of the state and the royal lineage.
So a real window into their concerns.
An unprecedented direct window. These inscriptions weren't just random notes. They were meticulously recorded interactions with the divine, a literal transcript of the decisions, anxieties, and interpretations that shaped the Shang world. They provide direct access into the minds of the Shang elite, like almost nothing else from that period globally.
Now, what's truly fascinating here, and of immense historical significance, is the nature of the writing system itself. As you touched on, it was an ideogram-based system.
Meaning pictures or symbols for ideas.
Essentially, yes. Each character fundamentally represented an idea, a concept, or an object, rather than primarily a sound, like in phonetic alphabets such as English. For example, you'd have a character that looks a bit like the sun to mean sun, or a tree for tree, or flowing lines for water, though it quickly became more abstract and complex than simple pictures.
Okay.
This foundational system is directly recognized as the ancestor of the modern Chinese writing system. It's a continuous, living link spanning over 3 millennia between ancient Shang and contemporary China.
That's incredible. A writing system evolving but staying connected for that long.
It's truly remarkable, and their historical importance just cannot be overstated. These written records, the oracle bones themselves, are the most significant and tangible primary evidence that unequivocally confirms the historical reality of the Shang dynasty. Before their discovery and decipherment in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, much of Shang history was based on later texts, often written centuries after the fact, sometimes considered semi-legendary.
Right, like Sima Qian's records.
Exactly. The oracle bones provided undeniable, direct contemporary proof. They gave us primary source access to the thoughts, concerns, specific events, names of kings, dates of rituals, outcomes of battles of this ancient civilization. They literally lifted the Shang out of the realm of myth and legend and placed it firmly into recorded history, allowing us to understand their world with a depth that was previously unimaginable.
It's truly incredible. It makes you think how much we wouldn't know, how much would still be speculation without the decipherment of those bones. Just fragments of pottery and bronze wouldn't tell the same story.
Not even close. The writing is the key.
Okay, so now let's explore how belief systems, this religion, intertwined with all this power, the innovation, the daily life. In Shang China, as you've hinted, religion wasn't a separate sphere from the state, was it?
Not at all. It was utterly and deeply integrated to every aspect of governance and society. The king, as we said, wasn't just a political ruler. He was perceived as directly connected to Shangdi.
Shangdi, the supreme sky god.
Yes, considered the supreme deity, the ultimate power who oversaw all things weather, harvests, battles, the fate of the kingdom. This divine connection gave the king's rule immense legitimacy. His decrees weren't just orders, they felt like cosmic mandates.
Makes him pretty powerful.
Extremely. And then there was the ancestor cult. This was arguably the most fundamental pillar of both the state and society. Ancestor worship was performed not just out of reverence or, filial piety, but with a very practical, almost transactional purpose.
Transactional, how so?
They aimed to seek aid, protection, and fertility from the deceased royal ancestors. The belief was that ancestors, once passed into the spirit world, retained significant influence over events in the living world. They could affect harvests, grant victory in battle, prevent misfortunes, or cause disasters if displeased.
So you had to keep the ancestors happy.
Absolutely crucial. Appeasing them and communicating with them through elaborate rituals, often involving animal and, yes, human sacrifices, offerings of food and wine in those magnificent bronze vessels, and divination using those very oracle bones was essential for the well-being and prosperity of the dynasty and its people. This wasn't merely a private spiritual practice, it was a core state function led by the king. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it becomes abundantly clear how these deeply ingrained religious beliefs serve to profoundly legitimize and reinforce the king's political authority.
How did that mechanism work exactly?
Well, the king wasn't simply a ruler by military might or political skill, although he needed those too. He was perceived as executing the direct will of the gods, particularly Shangdi, and his own powerful ancestors. His decisions, his military campaigns, even the success or failure of the harvest could all be attributed to divine favor, or lack thereof, channeled directly through him as the preeminent diviner and sacrificer.
So if things went well, it proved his connection.
Exactly. And if things went poorly, well, maybe the rituals needed adjusting, or an ancestor was displeased, requiring more attention. This divine mandate strengthened his rule immeasurably. It made dissent or rebellion not just an act of defiance against a mortal man, but a potential disruption of the cosmic order itself. This spiritual foundation was a critical, perhaps the critical component of Shang's stability, control, and its long-term endurance. It provided a powerful moral and supernatural justification for its hierarchical structure and the king's supreme power.
Right, that makes sense. A powerful state, justified by divine mandate, naturally needs a powerful military to back it up to maintain control, expand territory, secure resources. So what do our sources, including those oracle bones, tell us about the Shang army?
They tell us quite a bit, actually.
It's described as a strong, professional, and well-organized fighting force, clearly structured for both internal defense, putting down rebellions, and external territorial expansion. A significant innovation, as you mentioned, was the prominent role of their chariot unit.
War chariots, yeah.
Shang chariots, typically pulled by 2 or sometimes 4 horses, weren't just transport. They were mobile command platforms and formidable shock weapons on the relatively flat terrain of the Yellow River Plain. They would carry a driver, an archer, and maybe a soldier with a dagger axe, the Daiji.
A sort of ancient armored vehicle.
Kind of, yeah. They would have given them considerable speed, maneuverability, and shock power in battle, often serving as the decisive arm in conflicts against less mobile infantry forces.
Breaking enemy lines.
Exactly. And as we discussed earlier with their unparalleled bronze production, their technological superiority in weaponry was undeniable. Their bronze weapons, those sharp spearheads, the effective dagger axes, short swords, bronze helmets, provided a distinct, often overwhelming edge. It made their soldiers far more effective and formidable than those of neighboring tribes who might still be relying heavily on less durable stone tools or perhaps earlier, softer copper implements.
That technological edge must have been huge.
Absolutely. The precision casting meant the weapons were hard, held a sharp edge, and were standardized. Warfare, then, was not an infrequent occurrence for the Shang. It was absolutely central to the dynasty's survival and its ability to expand and maintain its vast territory. The oracle bones are full of questions about campaigns.
Asking if they should attack, if they'll be victorious.
All the time. The Shang engaged constantly in both offensive campaigns, seizing land, vital resources like salt or metal ores, and capturing those slaves we mentioned, and defensive strategies against surrounding nomadic or semi-nomadic tribes and sometimes rebellious vassal states. These relentless military campaigns were essential for securing resources, asserting dominance, and expanding their sphere of influence. They ensured the continued flow of tribute, wealth, and captives that directly supported their economy, their social structure, and, grimly, their sacrificial rituals.
So military power, religious authority, and economic control all tightly interwoven.
Perfectly put. And the 20th century archaeological excavations, particularly at Anyang, the late Shang capital, were truly pivotal in confirming and illuminating everything we've discussed today. It really brings it all together.
Which raises that important question again. What exactly did these excavations reveal that so definitively proved the Shang's historical reality, that moved it from, maybe legend to undeniable fact?
What did they find in the ground?
The findings were nothing short of astonishing, really transformative for our understanding. Archaeologists uncovered the meticulously planned remains of massive palace complexes and temple foundations, suggesting sophisticated urban planning, large-scale labor mobilization, and centralized authority.
Not just random huts.
Not at all. They unearthed incredibly elaborate royal tombs, like the famous tomb of Fu Hao, a consort of King Wuding. These tombs often contained staggering amounts of rich grave goods, hundreds of bronze vessels, jade carvings, pottery, weapons alongside the remains of human sacrifices, attendants, guards, and even the chariots and horses, meant to serve the ruler in the afterlife.
Wow. Providing insights into burial practices and their beliefs about the afterlife.
Exactly. And crucially, they found vast quantities, literally tons of those magnificent bronze artifacts we've been talking about, vessels, weapons, tools, confirming the sheer scale of their production and artistry. Workshops for bronze, bone, and pottery were also found.
Okay.
But the absolute linchpin of these discoveries, the undeniable proof that connected everything, were the tens of thousands of inscribed oracle bones found stored in pits, essentially the royal archives.
The written record itself.
The written record itself, contemporary to the period. These archaeological findings, systematically excavated and analyzed over decades, provided comprehensive, direct, and undeniable data on daily life, on specific religious beliefs and practices, on the intricacies of Shang governance, the names and genealogies of kings, and even records of specific events like battles, hunts, and astronomical observations. They didn't just suggest the dynasty's existence. They unequivocally proved its historical importance and provided an unparalleled, detailed window into its inner workings, its challenges, and its achievements. It was a staggering validation of those later historical texts that had long been considered potentially embellished or legendary. It cemented the Shang dynasty's place in the undisputed annals of history.
So bringing it all together then, what does this incredible deep dive into the Shang dynasty mean for us today? What's its enduring resonance? Why should we, care about this Bronze Age civilization from over 3,000 years ago?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, the Shang dynasty stands as a truly pivotal turning point in Chinese civilization. It wasn't just another ancient kingdom, it was the crucible where so many foundational elements of Chinese culture, governance, and identity were forged. Think about it. The incredible technological advancement in bronze casting, which not only created unparalleled art but also fueled their military might and centralized power. The emergence of that sophisticated writing system, preserved on oracle bones, that remarkably continues to evolve and function as the basis of Chinese script to this very day. A living linguistic legacy unlike almost any other.
That continuity is astounding.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then there's the intricate and deeply intertwined state-religion relationship with ancestor worship and divination that legitimized royal power and influenced every aspect of society for centuries to come, and a highly organized economic structure rooted in intensive agriculture, but supplemented by sophisticated craft production and trade networks. These elements weren't just fleeting historical footnotes, they were profound innovations that fundamentally shaped the later centuries of Chinese history. They laid the indispensable groundwork for subsequent dynasties, the Zhou, the Xie, the Han, and arguably the very identity of China as a continuous civilization.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that the Shang's legacy extends far beyond China's borders. It serves as an important historical reference point for world civilizations as a whole. It stands as this living, breathing testament, well, archaeologically living, to that monumental transition from prehistory, that vast era without written records, to a fully developed historical period, complete with complex social structures, sophisticated bureaucracy, advanced technology, elaborate art, and a profound spiritual life documented in writing. The Shang is an early shining symbol of civilization itself in that part of the world. It demonstrates humanity's remarkable capacity for innovation, sophisticated organization, and deep spiritual expression at a truly ancient stage. The foundations they laid, they show us how crucial these early developments were, not just for China, but for understanding the entire trajectory of human societal development globally. It provides a kind of blueprint for statecraft, technological achievement, and cultural identity that would echo through millennia in various forms.
We've covered so much ground today, haven't we? From the fertile banks of the Yellow River to the gleaming bronze ritual vessels and those absolutely incredible history-shaving oracle bones. The Shang Dynasty truly represents a foundational era, a civilization that laid down so much of the cultural and political DNA for what we recognize as Chinese culture today.
It really did set a powerful precedent.
So here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Consider how the foundational nature of Shang's innovations, everything from the very first stirrings of organized statecraft and sophisticated warfare to the emergence of their unique and enduring writing system and their powerful symbolic ritual art, how all that continues to resonate, maybe in subtle, perhaps even subconscious ways, within contemporary Chinese culture's view of its own long history, its sense of continuity, its identity, even millennia later. How much of that deep, ancient past still echoes in modern China's collective consciousness and values today? It's something to think about.
And that, I think, profoundly highlights the enduring power of archaeological discovery. It's not just about digging up old, interesting artifacts for curiosity's sake, though that's part of it. It's really about illuminating and validating history, bridging that often wide gap between ancient texts, sometimes frustratingly vague legends, and tangible, undeniable proof found in the ground. The Shang, once this realm of tantalizing legend and fragmented stories, was brought to vivid, undeniable life through the patient, meticulous work of archaeologists. It shows us how much we can still learn from what lies beneath our feet and how absolutely crucial that tangible evidence is for truly understanding our shared human past.
Absolutely. A powerful reminder. The Shang story really underscores how deeply rooted many of today's cultural forms and organizational structures are, going way back into the ancient past. We really hope this deep dive has given you a fresh and maybe profound perspective on this incredible, influential period, the dawn of China's Bronze Age. And if you're curious, believe me, there's always more to explore about the Shang Dynasty and its world. Thanks for joining us.